Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope this finds you well wherever this finds you in New Zealand. And greetings, well, from me. Welcome to Solid Ground, our weekly live series, which goes across multiple platforms. So some of you may be accessing this through the Family First Facebook page, of course, its Twitter account, LinkedIn, X now, we better call it that. Don't want Elon coming after me. Actually, he's probably too busy campaigning with Donald Trump and giving away $1 million a day. Good Lord. I see he's under his first lawsuit for that now, which is, well, it's very America. If you're not being sued, something's wrong. But look, Solid Ground is a weekly live show that I host. And basically, we look at, well, things that have caught my eye over the last week, be it political or cultural and ethical. And we have a bit of a chat about that based off good, solid conservative values, good consistent philosophy, good ethics. But also this is live. And so if you're watching this online, well, now that I say that, you wouldn't know if you weren't watching this online. But if you're watching this online, know if you go to the Family First Facebook page, and if you put comments in there, that will come live into the studio so I can see them. And so obviously that's a chance to interact. But more important, if you have any questions or thoughts on any of the topics we're discussing, or actually you have a wider question, if there's something burning on your mind that you want to ask, do so. So jump onto the Family First Facebook page, put it in the comments there. If you're commenting on the likes of LinkedIn, or if you're following this on my Facebook page, I'll see the comments later, but I won't see them live in the studio. So guys, there's always a lot to discuss. A lot of it actually around, well, it's one of my sort of go-tos, but it's this media bias, or what I'm going to suggest is a media presumption around a number of issues. But I thought I'd start with this one. Actually, Bob McCoskrie, posted a couple of days on this one, and I just thought it was an interesting topic to talk about. I'm going to try and write about it. It's interesting, actually, as I've started this Solid Ground, Bob has attempted to throw me by sending out another Substack. So as you'll know, Bob has joined Substack. It's a web page, substack.com, where different people can write articles and discuss topics. So I've been on there for a little while, but Bob is there with enthusiasm. I tend to write maybe one a week. He's prolific, and like the 2 minutes before the show, he's fired off another one. He's throwing me. But so early and fresh as I haven't actually seen what the topic is. Anyway, he wrote on socials, as in social media, a few days ago about this topic which the Herald reported. By the way, good morning, Lee. Lovely to have you here on the show. Welcome along. So, Statistics New Zealand, as you know, is it every 5 years or is it every 3? It doesn't really matter, but we do a census. And coming through the census, the results was that Christianity in general is declining in New Zealand. In fact, the overall result was that more people now identify as effectively non-Christian or atheist, agnostic, unsure. But what we did see in the so by the way, that's pretty accurate. I think most of us anecdotally can feel that, countries becoming more secular. I would argue pagan at the same time. It's funny how we celebrate at one level the loss of well, not us, but society celebrates at one level the loss of Christianity. Loudly proclaims it's secular. You often see that with debates of the likes of Bible in schools, but then very quickly and happily embraces a lot of pagan traditions. Again, you see it perfectly at school now. Saw it in Parliament where there's prayers to pagan gods on the coffee tables, in the parliamentary cafe and the like. I mean, I just thought, to be honest with you, I'm not going to swear on a live show, but it's basically BS for a number of reasons. I've got no time for paganism. That's the first. And doesn't lead well. If you read your history, paganism isn't a particularly happy or peaceful way forward. And secondly, I think it's just a whopping contradiction. in terms of New Zealand's supposed secular stance. But anyway, that's me going off on a tangent. But good morning to Amanda, to Rosie there in lovely Taupo. And we've got someone who's from Pakistan, of all places, joining us, so welcome. So, look, a few things, as I say, anecdotally we know Christianity is sliding. What was interesting in the results is it's mainly the traditional churches that were falling back. So Methodist, Presbyterian, Anglicans for sure, Baptist, all falling back in numbers. That the Catholics were not. I'd say a lot of that has to do with actually migration. We've got a lot of people who are coming from overseas who hold strong Catholic beliefs. So that was the only mainstream church that actually held. Importantly, really important, the stats showed that actually a lot of people just don't identify with a particular church. So in other words, they are Christian but not taking up particular labels. But I suppose the main point I wanted to get to this morning, it phrases this as why the church is losing ground. Well, it's because the churches don't stand for anything. That's the long and the short of it. If you had to be really blunt and without nuance, the Christian church no longer actually stands strongly or solidly of good Christian values. So many churches have turned to what they call sort of Western moral therapeutism. And you go, what? Moral? Well, Western moral therapeutism. So you go, what on earth has he been drinking? So Western, why I use that term is because actually the church outside of the West is doing quite well, thank you very much. So in Asia, Korea, well, of course that is in Asia, but I'm thinking China, Korea, certainly across Africa, Latin and South America, very strong Christian faith and growing. It's the West that's declining. The second set of words I used was moral therapeutism. And I think if you've gone to different churches yourself, you'll probably know what I mean when I explain it. It's basically churches or Christian churches that just sort of like self-help groups. The person of Jesus Christ is just a lovely guy that 2,000 years ago just talked a message of hope and kindliness, and he was just a nice guy. He wasn't really God, he was just a nice guy, and he's indicated to us how we should live our lives. And so the preaching in these churches is basically, as I say, self-help, a moral therapeutism. It's therapeutic. It's meant to sort of guide you to have a nice and happy life. So it's all about mindfulness and just being kind and generous. Now, in many ways, being kind and generous in themselves is not wrong. But the Christian message, without getting too theological at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, the Christian message is a whole lot more than just being a nice, happy person trying to make your life good or perfect. The Christian faith is solely and singularly based on the person of Christ as God and man. So that's one of the first tests for your Christian churches. If your pastor or priest or vicar or whatever it is can't confirm that God is both, the person of Christ is not God and man, you've got a problem. If they can't say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, well, you've got a problem with that church. And if it's all just based around what they deem as social justice, you've also got a problem. Christianity is not simply about doing good deeds. Christianity is actually about a way of salvation, a belief in God, a personal relationship, and a seeking to change one's heart. Redemption, let's be really, really clear with you. Christ didn't die on the cross so that you could have just simply a moral therapeutism. He died to redeem the world, and a world that's fallen, that has problems, that has sin. We all have it. Again, Christ's message is pretty simple. We're called to repentance, to change our lives, and that's probably the last thing you notice in these churches that are declining. They no longer call people to repentance or change. The only changes around your financial situation, or you need to be more, as I say, mindful, spend more time painting and drawing by the dots. But that's not what Christianity is about. It's actually about changing the very core of who we are. So it's actually a very, very challenging religion. Deeply, deeply challenging. And so you've seen with some of these woke churches of late, and was it a few weeks ago, there's a group called Common Grace, and you see it actually sadly with a number of even Christian charities now. They've basically sold themselves out to the modern zeitgeist or the modern world. So it's all about the climate, it's all about the Treaty of Waitangi, It's all about challenging capitalism. And, look, is there some truth in those? Is there some benefit? Of course there is. But at the same time, they've become really obsessed with the issues of the world. And maybe that's the thing I'm trying to grasp at here. I'm trying to reduce quite a lot of thoughts down, but, if your church is solely aligned to the topics of the day, I knew churches a few years ago that were all involved with the, Black Lives Matter movement, for example. Look, I'll be clear about it. I don't actually think the church has had much of a place in that, to be honest. But there they were. And again, you see this with a lot of the modern churches now, and some of the traditional ones. Sorry, I don't mean modern as new churches. Actually, their numbers are holding, and we'll come to the reason why. But a lot of the traditional churches basically just echo what society is saying. And again, that's not a part of Christianity. Christianity for 2,000 and a bit years has always been a challenging religion. It's always challenged the state. It's always challenged the status quo. But now, as I say, we have churches that are just echoing what you'd read in the New Zealand Herald or on TV1 or Radio New Zealand, which is why they're irrelevant, which is a very long way for me to get there. They're very much irrelevant. And it's not a surprise. And they will die. But the church will survive. This is the quirk in all of this. The church will just die out in many ways, or a lot of these denominations will, because they're just utterly irrelevant. There's no real spirit or hope in them. But the church itself will survive and regrow. It's what it's always done. But as I say, if you're going to a church where it's all just Jesus is a nice guy, you've just got to sort of change your life so that you're happier and got better mental health. And by the way, you should be out protesting with Greta Thunberg. You're not really in a Christian church. That's not the Christian message. It's much more challenging. As I say, the death of Christ was not for those reasons. So anyway, there's a long discourse. There's the newer churches are holding, so some of the ones that are much more biblically focused. I certainly know within some of the traditional or mainstream churches which are holding to traditional values, they're growing. So, when I look around different friends and through my own family, for example, excuse me, a lot of people, put it this way, the churches which hold to the Christian message are doing well, thank you very much. Those that are selling themselves out to the world are not. It's the old go woke, go broke, and it's right in front of us. And you see it too, well, I saw it in the political realm. Plenty of pastors and priests and clerics wanting to come in to talk, as I say, about the Treaty of Waitangi or global climate change, but never there, or very rarely there, to talk about euthanasia or abortion or conversion therapy or marriage or anything like that. Some of the more key Christian values, the element of life is pretty fundamental. So again, it's very, very telling. So anyway, that was a very long discourse, guys, and I've just realised I've left that image on while I was talking. So that's a very long discourse there. Amanda says, though, I don't believe that Christianity is on the decline. She says she believes, let me see, I've lost there's the button. I think Amanda's right. There's a lot of people that they're just not identifying as strongly with a particular domination. So it's that's important. That's important. Tony says we need to stand firm on the fundamental truths. Yeah, absolutely. We do, and I think actually, Tony, you've probably summed it up much more succinctly than I do. But the Christian life, the Christian teachings are pretty clear. We've 2,000 years of articulation. Here we go. Here's a smart bunny. Bob, who of course founded Family First, thought that this was a much better image to keep up, which is probably right. But here's me so drifting in my discussion. But jumping back, Tony's completely right. We just have to keep to the fundamental truth. And long and short, you see these churches fall by the wayside when they don't, and they'll just make themselves irrelevant, which is sad to see. And I've seen it with a number of Christian social groups as well. They've moved away from being explicitly Christian to just they embrace identity politics. They embrace the politics of the day. Actually, Harry's just nailed it. These charities and groups, they just focus on social justice, which is neither social nor just. I can explain that another day. And they just fade into irrelevance. Again, big charities. It's just really sad, actually. Anyway. And Tracy. Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Better say I'm married. No, I'm only kidding. Well, I am married, but yeah, all jokes aside, thank you, Tracy. It's the big challenge. It's the big challenge that we have. Hey, jumping topics onto one of my favourite bugbears is the media. And I just thought some things were quite fascinating in the way they were reporting of late. And it's about actually some appointments that the government's been making. I suppose my key point that I'm wanting to drive home here, and all these three quick examples I intend to give, is this arrogant presumption, I would suggest by the left in particular, but certainly the woke left, or those who embrace the DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion, intersectionality, all of that, the woke crew, they believe that they have an entitlement to run all the institutions. And so keep that in your mind as I go through these. So last week, the government appointed this gentleman, Philip Crump, to New Zealand On Air. Now, New Zealand On Air is basically a funder of a lot of New Zealand television and radio programs. And Philip Crump is actually a lovely guy, a lawyer, prolific writer. He used to write on Substack and elsewhere something called Cranmer's, was like Cranmer's Substack. Long and short, and Cranmer's actually I think it's a medieval jurist, but he wrote under the sobriquet or, alias, there's the word. Use a simpler word when you can, eh? He wrote under an alias for a number of years. And actually just delving into political issues, he wasn't too, I would argue, partisan, though certainly to the right. Actually exposed quite a number of things happening in government. He did quite a lot of in-depth research. So I suppose a very long way of saying he's actually quite a considered, smart individual. And about a year ago, News Talk ZB actually put him on as an editor for something called ZB Plus. It was sort of an online discussion platform. To be fair, it didn't work out so well, but that's really by the by for this. He's a smart, considerate man. But unfortunately for him, he's on the right. And I'm just going to fire this because Christine and Brendan have nailed it. He's a very clever guy. In fact, I would encourage people to look up his Substack, his writing, or follow him on the likes of Twitter. But as I say, he got appointed, and all of a sudden the media, this is the spin-off complaining of why he's there, because he's not one of us, is basically their message, guys. Because he's not left-wing, he shouldn't be there. He's not allowed to have an opinion. He's not even allowed to sit on the board. Again, and I'm going to give you some more examples because this is not singular. The left here, or the woke, believe that they should control everything. It's why they toss their toys when they don't win elections. You wait for the violence and just wait for the violence and the protests. If and when, I suspect it's when Trump wins in a few days, the tolerant left will show themselves the violent people that they are. You saw it in France. In fact, the irony with France, when the left won, is the left still rioted, but that's France for you. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. So this guy, because he's right-wing and considered, and actually has a brain and a lawyer, he shouldn't be on New Zealand On Air, according to Duncan Grieve of the spin-off. It's just not on. We then have this fellow here, slightly more controversial, you could argue, but the government's appointed Richard Prebble to the Waitangi Tribunal. And that's gone down like a cup of cold you-know-what. Again, the woke, the lefties, the treaty radicals are all up in arms of how is this even possible? He shouldn't be allowed there. Only people who fully agree with our reconstructed view of the treaty should be allowed on this panel. How dare this man? Again, I think he might have been a lawyer. He's actually represented a number of treaty claimants, obviously a former government minister. I don't know him well enough. I assume he's bringing some skills. It's a tribunal, by the way. There's a whole lot of people. But again, it's just to illustrate, here is, again, another organisation that many of us would see as pretty captured, like New Zealand Air, the Waitangi Tribunal, most of the institutions that the government appoints to have been captured by the ideological left, the Marxists and so forth, like the universities. They all get upset. How dare he be appointed? No one's actually attacked his skill set. It's just that he's right-wing. And then this one, you might remember I think it's almost a month ago now. So Paul Goldsmith, he's the minister in the middle, appointed Dr. Melissa Darby, so she obviously is the lady, and Dr. Stephen Rainbow to the Human Rights Commission. And again, huge outcry, and still going from the left, because these guys are not left-wing woke lunatics. They're actually far more considered in their opinions. Stephen Rainbow's crimes, amongst others, was that he leans more towards supporting Israel, and he thinks a lot of trans activism has gone just a bit too far, and he says that himself as a gay man. And then Melissa Darby, again, is quite moderate on political issues, and again, that's a no-no. You have to be a far left radical to be put onto any of these boards. So look, it's a long discussion, as per me, but look, this is what we're just illustrating. Is here's 3 examples, be it Philip, be it Richard, be it Melissa or Stephen Rainbow. The complaints are not because they don't have the skill sets. The complaints is that they're not left-wing radicals. And that just tells you all you need to know about any of these intersectionalists, these cultural Marxists, left-wing woke. When they talk about diversity, when they talk about tolerance, they don't believe it. They just want power. And there's been some, more upset recently about the New Zealand curriculum being changed around history, which is good, by the way, because the new curriculum is just an absolute ridiculous piece of work. Fundamentally, because one of its core 3 principles is that history is based on power. Now, history is not. History is actually based on relationships, amongst other things. But the idea that history is driven by power is a Marxist concept. And how does that link into what I've just been saying? Well, fundamentally, the left want power. They decry it. They decry anyone who has it other than themselves. That's the key point for you guys this morning. The left hate power when it's in the hands of others. They want it desperately, which is why, the slow march through the institutions, while they've taken over the political parties, many and most of them, even National's been drawn into a lot of this stuff. Some of us can see it. A lot of them are still blind to it. Obviously, the likes of Labour and the Greens and Te Pāti Māori. Look, to be honest, just about all the political parties have been drawn in some way or another. But the left believe that they need to control everything. They want to control the Human Rights Commission. They want to control New Zealand on air. They want to control the Waitangi Tribunal. And that's the key point. The left love power. And they'll do anything they can get. And Emily sums it up nicely too. It's only one way. You're dead right, Emily. This is the hypocrisy. There we go. The hypocrisy of the woke, the left, the Marxists. Guys, there's so many words, and I always feel if I'm choosing one, I'm ignoring the others. They're not tolerant. In fact, I think I wrote something on Substack a few months ago that notice those who talk about tolerance are often the least. Again, think about what happened in Albert Park. Supposedly this was meant to be this is the Posey Parker. This was supposed to be the vanguard of the loving, caring, tolerant, ever-widening gender and sexuality crowd who basically came up and beat up old women. It's just ridiculous. And look, Tony's nailed it too. The church is for the saved, not the lost. The church is there to save us, for sure, or through the church. It's there to help people change. I suppose that's one of the big things I just say, coming back to that church topic. And I've often said it this way: the gospel is there to change the culture, not the culture, the gospel. Maybe that's just something to bear in mind. The gospel's there to change us. It's not there for us to change. And so that's maybe one of the most simple litmus tests when you're going to church. Is the gospel changing you, or is you or your church or your pastor trying to change the gospel? Bible's pretty clear on pro-life issues, but if the pastor's saying, euthanasia's okay, death penalty's okay, abortion's okay, you're going, yeah, well, that's you changing the gospel. Anyway, off on another tangent. But speaking of media bias, because this plays off again, the media not only can't accept that there's alternative views, they also try to make silly little arguments. And this is it's behind a paywall, I'm afraid, but this is the New Zealand Herald, basically using a tired old trope around cannabis. And you can see from what they phrase as a question is actually their statement. And as you can anticipate, the Herald's saying, look, there's so much violent crime, why are we bothering with drug busts? To be honest with you, an idiotic argument of a 3-year-old. So if the Herald's editor is listening at the moment, go and read a book I mean, what a pathetically stupid argument. Well, we've got violent crime, so we should stop, traffic ticketing. We've got so much violent crime, the police should stop doing some of the financial fraud. I mean, honestly, how stupid can you be? It's an infantile argument. But what's interesting is you read the article, and I'm sorry for many of you, it's behind the paywall. They go on to say about the referendum, and that's my key point from this. They say, the referendum was close, and the pro-life, if you will, or the anti-drug crowd won, but it's not a referendum we really like. And there's my key point. Have you noticed with referendum, the left are exceptionally happy when they win? Doesn't matter even by 0.5%, they're happy. The moment they lose, and they lost cannabis, let's be really clear about that. A big part of it being family first activism and lobbying, actually. But it's interesting how the Herald doesn't like that result, so it's already poo-pooing it. And then they went on, which I thought was quite funny. They went to say, we did a poll up north, in the far, far north of New Zealand, and about 90-something% of people want cannabis decriminalised. Well, that's nice. But, when one thinks of the far north in general, one of our most impoverished, crime is rife, economically stunted areas. And that's not to say that cannabis is the driver, but there's correlations. And so I just thought my last point on this is here is an editor of a newspaper living their little comfortable life, probably the Chardonnay swilling socialists of Ponsonby, more than happy to use the misery of actually a lot of people up north to justify their cannabis use. And that was one of the big things I saw in the cannabis debate. Again, it's all these lovies in their little urban areas living very comfortable lives who have no care or consideration for understanding what damage cannabis does to so many of our communities. And if you'd like to see what cannabis does to communities, go up to the far north. I challenge the editor to do it by himself, no bodyguards or anything, and go and see how he fears. So anyway, because actually it's very broken in some of those communities up there. The crime is horrific. And drugs are always a big part of it. The other thing within this article was the old lie, and it is a lie. They say, Jacinda, God, I've mentioned her name this morning, but didn't want anyone to go to prison, because that was their argument. No one should go to prison for using cannabis. Well, no one does. No one's gone to prison for using cannabis for decades now. It's just one of these again, it's just these lies. I suppose it's one of the reasons we do Solid Ground, guys, is to try and get in behind the news. It's also why we're doing other shows like Pulse Point. Obviously, Bob does his McBlogs, is to get in behind these sort of things, because the media, in many ways, is lying to you. Not in all and every case, but they are lying to you. And this is just a really good example of it. They lie in the nature of the argument. They're lying in terms of how the referendum handled, and they're holding back key information from you. As I say, they're sort of dog whistling that people go to prison for using cannabis. They do not. They do not. And I mean, look up the parliamentary records in the debate. It's very clear. They do not. But the media are happy to press that stuff out. So look, it's just, very, very frustrating. And then the last thing, again, it's just sort of this political bias. I suppose that's my theme this morning. Is this one. And this is to do with Australia at the moment. So this is Candace Owen. I'm lukewarm on her. There's some things in her early days I liked. I'm not so comfortable with her views on a number of issues these days. Let's just leave it at that. I'm not very comfortable with a number of her views at the moment. But the context here is that she's on a speaking tour, I believe, and the Australians have revoked her visa, so she can't go to Australia, and now the pressure's building for Immigration New Zealand to pull her visa here as well. Personally, I think that would be inappropriate. The fact, again, some of the other articles told her a far-right broadcaster and so forth. Long and short, the left, the woke, whatever we're going to call them, are more than happy to censor people. So remember earlier on, as I say, they delight in the churches breaking down because there's no challenge there. I mentioned the various government appointments like New Zealand On Air or the Human Rights Commission. They're furious that there's, not their mates. And now for someone who's got views that are not theirs, well, they have to be censored. They have to be banned. And I just don't think that's appropriate. As I say, I don't particularly agree with a lot of her stuff. But she's welcome to come and say it. I don't believe she's inciting violence. it's one of the core tests for actually censoring or stopping people speaking. Her fault really to the left is she doesn't hold their views. They've got no problem bringing in their left-wing zealots, be it on economic issues, treaty issues, indigenous issues, whatever else we want to add in there. Their political issues, Palestine, that's not a problem. Those people are to be welcomed. In fact, you'll never find them reported in the papers. But something like this, we've got a banner. So let's hope Immigration New Zealand does not. As I say, not because I particularly like what she has to say in a number of areas, but I just don't really like censoring people. But we've seen this, unfortunately, a lot. And watch this space. The New Zealand media, the lackeys that they are, will beat this up. They will just keep coming back and back to this. And so really, I suppose, I'm sorry to be a bit heavy this morning, but just be aware that really, you're not as free in this country as you think. That's maybe one of the little themes going through today, and maybe I should write about that a bit more, but you're really not as free as you think in this country. Because if your view doesn't align, you won't be reported. As I say, I write quite frequently. I know the likes of Bob does. We're writing on the places like Substack and using social media to get around mainstream because we don't get reported. As you know, with Family First, it celebrates family. The New Zealand courts decided that that's no longer a good value, and so they removed Family First charitable status, and they'll come after other charities. They're coming after the churches. They're coming after government appointees. You're not allowed to express your faith or beliefs at work. I mean, I'm sure many of you would find it very, very difficult. In fact, you have to comply. So you're not as free as you think, I'm sad to say, guys. Anyway, gosh, heavy and dramatic. But important that we touch on these things. Hey, a few last quick points. I keep talking about writing, so Bob's been busy, as always. This is not his most recent blog because he writes so prolifically and wonderfully. Yeah, I'm just going to put this up from Andrew, actually, because this sums up my view as well. Yeah, look, dead right, Andrew. That's just quickly. That's my take as well. If anyone was coming here, like some of these radical Islamic clerics that we've had at time to time, that can be a problem where literally people are coming, as they have in Australia, to incite violence. That's a no-no. But coming with alternative political views, even being quite offensive. I said her views for me around Israel and the Jewish people are actually quite offensive. But I've noted even people within the Jewish community here have said, look, don't like what she says, but she's welcome to come and say it. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent again, but Andrew, you've nailed it. This is one of Bob's recent Substacks, so go to substack.com, look up McBlog or Bob McCroskey. I've been writing, but I've actually had another death in our family. My mother-in-law's passed away, sadly, so I've been a bit delayed over the last few days writing, anyway, that's a sad aside. But this was my most recent one, again, just showing the inconsistency. And again, focusing on how media misleads, in this case by actually advocating for issues and then trying to supposedly report on it. But yeah, you can go to my Substack, either just look up my name or On Point. And of course, I do my weekly radio show, online radio with Reality Check Radio. So just look up RCR or Reality Check Radio. I do Friday mornings from 10 till 12. And then, like so many things, there is a whole lot of other, not Facebook, Family First shows. So I'm just going to give you a little preview of those.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary on key family and social issues, and conservative conversations, go no further. Family First has them all. Monday nights, live at 8 p.m, Straight Talk with our panel. Tuesday mornings, live at 8 a.m, Solid Ground with Simon O'Connor. Wednesdays, watch for the latest episode of Pulse Point to drop. We watch the news so that you don't have to. Thursdays, live at 5 p.m, political playback with Bob McCoskrie and Simon O'Connor discussing the week in Parliament and politics in general. Plus, there's regular episodes of social commentary with McBlog and interviews on family matters throughout the week. You can watch these live and also on demand on our website, Facebook page, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Finally, something worth watching that you can trust. Go to familyfirst.watch for more details.
There we go, guys. As you can guess, family first, and certainly through Bob's leadership, we're really keen to, in a sense, provide you more information. And you can see we're reaching more and more into media. In fact, get this, Family First's reach is bigger than many of the programs on, is it TV3? They've launched some new news shows, and actually Family First's get a much larger leadership and viewership, sorry. But, we are actually hoping to become leaders in this space. But really importantly, and really important from my side, I've got clear views and opinions, got clear views of how our mainstream media by and large is operating, but I welcome your feedback. If there's elements that you agree with, love to hear that. But if there's things you go, no, that's wrong, or I've got the wrong end of the stick, love to hear it. Get in touch. As you know, we're across social media. Fire off your comments. I'll actually read them. Unlike the New Zealand Herald, I don't block comments. Would love to hear what you've got to say, and we want your feedback. So know you can always do so. But in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Bob and I will be back on Thursday evening, so we do something together called Political Playback. That's at 5 o'clock live across social media on a Thursday. Pulse Point with our new colleague James comes out on a Wednesday. And I forgot to mention, actually, later today, I'm publishing a podcast. I sat down with a woman called Rebecca Vachon. She's out of a think tank in Canada, talking euthanasia. She's giving, me, but through my recording to you, an insight of all the quite disturbing things which are happening in Canada at the moment. So that'll go out live in a few hours. So yeah, Family Matters, the podcast, will drop in a few hours. Tomorrow is Pulse Point, really great news series headed up by James at the moment. You might remember Tumby Stowers used to front it. She's just had a child, which is marvellous. And then, as I say, Thursday's Political Playback. And throughout all of that time, Bob will be busy doing his McBlog. So look, there is no shortage of content, guys. But you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining me. See you next week.